This is Season 1, Episode 7 of Twins Discuss. I'm Raquel, a research scientist.
And I'm Raven, a medical professional.
Today the twins discuss the disappearance of the MV Cemfjord. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mentions of death that may not be suitable for some. This podcast was written using information from various sources. It is presented as accurately as possible, though some of what is mentioned is simply speculation. Sources can be found on our social media pages at Twins Discuss Podcast. So I remember when I first heard about the Cemfjord, I was insanely invested in the story from the second that it popped up on my screen in 2015. And I remember scouring the web for information about it and looking for anything I could find because it was international and it was hard to get news stories to follow it from America. So I remember sending you the initial BBC news article when they discovered it, and you were just mortified.
Yeah, I vaguely recall it, and I haven't looked it up or anything. I know you sent me that little blip the other night on Messenger, or last night, but this is what I'm working on. And I showed my boyfriend, and he was like, I was like, this is, and he was like, yeah, that's a ship, Raven. I'm like, oh no, it's not. It's yes, I think. I don't know.
It's terrifying. Yeah. And I've wanted to. So the thing that I tend to do is I'll follow something really intensely for about a week, and then if things don't progress, I will stop following it until the official report comes out, and then I'll catch up on it again because I don't like speculation. I typically want facts, and I don't want folks rolling around saying things that aren't true, and we have no idea what's going on. So I waited on this until I almost forgot about it. And the report came out in 2016, and I read it then, and then I moved on. When we started this podcast, I knew that this was a story that I wanted to cover.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones you brought up. That and another one, the Wilhelm Gustloff or whatever.
Wilhelm Gustloff. That will be in 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
So, Well, not 2 weeks from now, 2 stories from now. So we have this one, then we have our next story, and then the Wilhelm Gustloff we'll be doing.
Yep. We're going to start picking up on the maritime wrecks.
Oh, yeah. I've got quite a few. Actually, I started planning out season 3 the other night, and there are 2 maritime incidents in it that I want to cover. So I haven't had a chance to talk to you about that yet, but I know you'll be fine with it. I know you actually have never heard of either one of them.
Well, then I'm looking forward to it. When's our North Carolina segment coming up?
We have MK Ultra, and then the Wilhelm Gustloff, then the Mothman, and then the Angela Hammond's disappearance or story, and then our North Carolina segment starts.
Y'all, it's coming up real soon.
About a month, yeah. Because we're going to start going back to, I think, every week in mid-September, correct? Yeah.
Beginning of September, yep.
So the North Carolina segment will be fun.
It will be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Are you ready to get to it?
Yeah, there actually are a few definitions I want to cover before we start the story.
Okay.
So, because this one is very nautical, lots of nautical nomenclature in it, more than I typically use because it's an international story, so there are certain terms I had to kind of translate to make it make sense for our native listeners.
Okay.
So MV stands for merchant vessel or motor vessel. Starboard is right side, and port is left side. I know we've only had one story so far that's been maritime, so I wanted to make sure that I reiterated that for people, because I will not be saying it again.
Yeah, starboard and port are pretty easy because port has 4 letters, left has 4 letters. And then starboard has more than 4. So it's right, which has more than 4.
It's the one that's left over, Raven, if that's how you get there.
Yeah, that's how I got there. There's a roundabout way.
Yep. The word beam, B-E-A-M, is the width of the ship. Waterline is where the hull of the ship meets the surface of the water. Keel, K-E-E-L, is the bottommost longitudinal structural element on a vessel.
Okay.
Draft, as in like horses or cows draft, or beer, is the vertical distance between the water line and the bottom of the ship's keel, and it's measured in terms of depth because it's below the water, so it's measured in depth.
Okay.
Whereas air draft is the distance from the water line to the highest point of the ship, and that's measured in height because it's above the water line.
That makes sense.
Yep. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood that before we got started. And typically, when a ship takes on cargo, the draft typically increases because the ship sinks further in the water, and the air draft will decrease because the ship's sitting further in the water.
Okay.
All right, great. Good to go.
All righty, here we go.
The Cemfjord was built as a cargo vessel in 1984 by Detlef Hagemann Rolandworft in what at the time was Bremen, West Germany. She was 83.18 meters, or 272 feet 9 inches long, with a beam length of 11.34 meters, or 37 feet 2 inches. Her draft was 4.4 meters, or 14 feet 5 inches, and she had an air draft of 21 meters, or 68 feet 11 inches. She weighed 1,850 gross tons when empty.
Big girl.
Yep, but not as big as Alfaro was.
Nope, she's just sturdy.
Yep. She was owned by Thelke Scheppers Gesellschaft mit Beschränkter Haftung and Company Commandit Gesellschaft, and operated by Margareta and Company out of Heeren, West Germany. From 1984 to 2004, she was called Margareta and sailed under the West German flag, and then in 1989 the German flag. She was sold in 1995 to Shark Shipping Company Namlu's Vennootschap in Willemstad of the former Netherlands Antilles. At the time, she was placed under the management of Bryce Schiffvaartgesellschaft mit Beschränkter Haftung and Company Commandit Gesellschaft. In June 1998, she was converted into a cement carrier with 2 holds capable of hauling roughly 2,000 cubic meters of dry bulk white cement. She was further equipped with a pneumatic self-loading and discharging system to more safely load and offload this cement. In 2004, Margareta became Cemfjord, and here's where the history kind of gets a little fuzzy for me. I had to piece this together from actual records of this ship because everywhere that I looked, all of this was kind of disjointed. So her port of registry was changed from Germany to the Republic of Cyprus, and her registered owner became Baltic Sun Partin de Rai, but her manager was listed as Bryce Gesellschaft mit Beschränkter Haftung. And if you don't speak German, that all probably sounded the same, but for our German-speaking listeners, those two are clearly different names, although they do sound very similar to each other. So I believe that Bryce just changed their name, and it's the same management company.
Okay.
And that I'm not sure if they were bought by Baltic Sun or if they own Baltic Sun as a management firm. I'm not sure.
Nah.
But yeah, so as of 2014, she was managed by Bryce Berry-de-Rungs of Hamburg.
Okay.
So Cemfjord had a relatively quiet life. She only ran into trouble about 3 times in her 31 years of service, from what I could find. The first incident occurred on December 15th, 2013, when she was detained in Runcorn, England, following a routine safety inspection. The inspection found 11 mechanical and safety failures, and 2 of those were critical. The first critical failure found was that the launch apparatus, or the divot, for one of the lifeboats was inoperable, and the second failure was that the bilge pumps were not functioning properly. From our El Faro episode, we understand how important bilge pumps are to large ships. Yeah. So, because they weren't functioning properly, the Cypriot authorities were informed, and they required the ship to carry 2 portable pumps to make up the difference. And after the inspection of these pumps and a placement of a 3rd lifeboat, Cemfjord was released on December 18th, 2013 to continue her previous trek. However, because of this inspection, the Cypriot authorities told Cemfjord that she was restricted to sail in waters no more than 150 miles from the coastline.
That's curious.
Yeah, Rick Spellman of the Old Salt blog reported that this was likely because the Cyprus authorities were concerned that Cemfjord couldn't tolerate the potentially treacherous conditions that typically existed further offshore. And so they actually kept her restricted for the remainder of her career. They never fixed these issues, I suppose, or didn't have time. I mean, again, we know how difficult it is to get a ship into repair when there's supply demands going on.
Yeah, El Faro taught us a lot.
Yeah, and that's just domestic. This is international, so can't imagine. The second incident that followed this one happened about 7 months later on July 29th, 2014, when at 22:14, Cemfjord ran aground off the coast of Denmark. I know it sounds dramatic that she ran aground, but groundings happen a lot more often than we really realize. I was able to dig through a couple of journal articles, and I found a 1999 study for the International Journal of Offshore and Polar Engineering, which sounds like a great journal, and I'm probably going to start reading it.
Great.
That grounding actually accounts for 1/3 of all commercial shipping accidents.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's changed a lot in the last 20 years or not. I couldn't find a ton about it in the short period that I was researching for this story.
I mean, technology has increased a lot when it comes to, sonographs and all that, so...
Right, but that's one thing I was thinking about, that even with more robust technology, I did find another study that's in 2009 for ships and offshore structures that stated that grounding happened only slightly less frequently than ship-on-ship collisions, which is actually the #1 shipping accident type. So they just out there hitting ground and each other all over the place, which it makes sense. I mean,
they're clubbing.
Right. But by the time you realize one of these large ships is nearby, it might be too late.
Yeah, that's not the fun kind of bump and grind.
It's really not, no. And it was discovered during the investigation for this incident that the grounding was entirely preventable because the 47-year-old Russian captain at the time had been completely drunk at the helm.
Ah, yes. Why not?
So he was released from duty on that voyage, and a new Polish captain was put in his place for the remainder of the trip.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, happens. There's been a lot of drunk. I mean, El Faro had a drunk captain. I guess you're offshore. Sailing and drinking are typically hand in hand.
Yeah, but was he drunk while he was doing the El Faro? Because you never mentioned it.
The captain before Davidson.
Okay.
For El Mora, remember?
El Mora. Oh,
and
yeah.
So El Mora was going to be replaced. Yeah. Or El Faro was going to replace El Mora, and the captain got in a drunk incident.
That's right.
Yeah, no, Davidson was never a drunk captain. He was too into safety for that. So, strangely enough, the third incident occurred not even a month later when a different Russian captain, who was 59 years old, was also arrested for being drunk at Cemfjord's helm and sentenced to 35 days in prison and 2 years of ocean probation, which means he just can't sail for the seas or particular companies for 2 years.
Wow, you should get an entire, revocation of your license in general if you're drunk behind the helm of, or the wheel of anything.
Absolutely, 100% agree about that. So, do you want to get into talking about the Cemfjord?
Yeah?
A lot about what I'm about to tell you comes straight out of the Marine Accident Investigation Branches, or the MAIB's incident report, which was released on August, I think it was the 15th of 2016, and we'll be linking that article in our podcast pages. So on December 29th, 2014, at 2200, Cemfjord made berth at Aalborg Portland's cement loading terminal in Rordal, Denmark. At 2250, cement loading began while the starboard and port ballast pumps began pumping water out of the ballast tanks to offset the newly added cargo weight, which was roughly 150 tons per hour.
Good grief.
The pneumatic pumps, man.
You're not kidding.
Yep, and they're moving dry cement, so, there's less chance of it getting clogged and stuff. So, yeah, 150 tons per hour. During loading, though, the ship began listing to port, and it was discovered that the port pump was not pumping correctly, the one that we'd had issues with almost a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was discovered that she was producing a 5-degree list. So the loading was ceased at 1:39 in the morning. This would be on the 30th of December, 2014. Corrective measures were taken, and loading recommenced at 4:30 in the morning, but was stopped again at 4:57 as the port pump was still not able to keep up. At this point, the Rordal authorities contacted the Cypriot authorities, and they ordered a portable pump from a local supplier and had the crew set it up in the port ballast tank, and then loading of the cement resumed at 9:59 a.m.
Okay, so they had, make sure I get this right. The original pump wasn't working, so they had a portable put in. Were they running both of them at the same time, or just the portable?
I'm assuming they're going to run both of them, but...
Yeah, one will compensate for the other's inadequacy.
Right.
Okay.
At 12:34, loading ended, and the total cargo weight put into the Cemfjord was 2,084 tons.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a lot of tonnage.
It is a lot of tonnage. The portable pump was then returned to the supplier.
Oh, no.
So they didn't take it with them.
I can see how this might be a problem.
Yeah, anytime that something like that is noted, it's probably going to be valuable information for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. At 1300, Cemfjord left Rordal, Denmark, and began her journey to Runcorn, England, with a crew of 8 sailors. The trip was scheduled to take about 6 days and would take them through the Pentland Firth, an often treacherous strait between the Orkney Islands and Caithness, Scotland. As a matter of fact, the tidal power is so strong in the Pentland Firth that a tidal power plant is currently under construction there.
Whoa.
So we're talking about a ship that has been restricted to coastline waters because it because it can't tolerate being further out to sea because the conditions could be treacherous, and yet she's about to travel through, which she's done this trip before. This is not new, but she's traveling through this strait that has tidal power so strong they're gonna put little water wind turbines under the water to generate power.
Yeah, it's like, well, every time she makes a trip, she gets a little older. So, I mean...
Don't we all?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. This day, nothing was really notable. She progressed without trouble between December 30th and the 31st, clearing the markers on her passage on schedule and submitting daily reports as expected. She was moving at an average of 9.2 knots, which is pretty good. However, on January 1st, 2015, at 7:44, the captain noted that for the last 24 hours, the North Sea was producing increasingly heavy seas and deteriorating weather, and this would cause a 2-hour delay in their estimated arrival. So at the time, her average speed had decreased to 6.8 knots.
I think that the 2 hours is I mean, I guess because we can look at it in hindsight that this ship sank or whatever it's going to do. That 2 hours seems negligible. But to them, they have to, as you said with El Faro, they have a set schedule. They have to meet.
Yeah,
because time is money.
And in Cemfjord's case, they were under a lot of pressure to arrive on time or earlier.
Because they're probably already delayed with the loading.
Yep, exactly. So they were already behind almost half a day because of the loading incident.
Mm.
And now they're going to be 2 hours later. And that just sets them behind even more.
Yeah.
At 4:09 on January 2nd, 2015, Cemfjord's Automatic Identification System, or the AIS, signaled the UK Coast Guard that the ship was 43 nautical miles east of the entrance to the Pentland Firth. The seas were still increasingly violent, but still passable. At 7:21, the ship's captain reported the Cemfjord was running on a 10-hour delay, and that would make their arrival at the Liverpool Bar Buoy happen at 2 o'clock in the morning on January 5th, 2015. Originally, they were scheduled to arrive at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on January 4th.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, so they're now even, more than a day and a half behind. At 10:52, the captain made his call to the Shetland Coast Guard, informing them that they were approaching the Pentland Firth. The Shetland Coast Guard made note of the intended ports of call, crew number, and cargo, and told the Cemfjord that they could track their progress on AIS, and the Cemfjord would not be required to announce when they had cleared the strait.
Okay.
So it was one of those you can do it if you want to, but you don't have to sort of systems.
Mm-hmm.
That always seems like a bad idea. To me, it's like, let me know when you leave the house and when you get home.
Yes.
Yeah. The more you know, the better. But I guess they didn't want to tie up channels because the Pentland Firth is a relatively busy strait.
Mm-hmm.
It's not actually even a real firth. It's a strait. Firths are typically inlets, like into land or, out of rivers. And a strait is between islands in an ocean.
Okay.
Little
I'll take
geography
your word
lesson
for
there.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
That's why I keep calling it a strait instead of a firth, because it's not a firth. But it's called a firth. Yeah. At 11 o'clock, Cemfjord called Bryce and reported their average speed over the last 24 hours was 5.8 knots, and their estimated time of arrival on January 5th, the same one that I just discussed with you.
Mm-hmm.
It was also noted that the ship was experiencing gale force winds coming in from the west of between 75 to 88 kilometers per hour, or 47 to 54 miles per hour. And that the wave height was 7 to 10 meters, or 23 to 32 feet in height.
That's not little.
It's not. One thing I want to note about the way that the Cemfjord was built is that she only had about a meter of clearance from what's known as the freeboard line on the ship and the her draft. So where she sat on the water line and the amount of room she had when she was fully loaded from the water line to the deck of the ship was like less than a meter. It was like 2.2 feet 9 inches.
That's terrifying.
Can you imagine?
No.
Right. This ship in the water with waves of 23 and 32 feet. And she only has 2 feet of difference between her water line and her deck.
With a failing bilge pump, it's all good.
Right. Right. And on the Beaufort gale force wind scale, this was a level 9.
What's the highest?
12.
Oh, okay. That's not a small number.
This is a strong and heavy storm that they're in, and it's strong enough that typically it pulls pieces off of ships.
Okay.
It doesn't always prove fatal, but it is something that you really have to go into cautiously.
Mm-hmm.
Between 12 o'clock and 12:36, the Cemfjord was near enough to the Scottish coastline that they actually got cell reception. So it was at this time that the crew decided that they would call their families and talk for a few minutes. So the ones that were married were able to get up with their wives and talk for between 3 and 5 minutes before they lost reception.
Well, at least they're staying close to the shoreline like they're supposed to do.
Right, and at least they got to talk to their family members.
Yeah.
Yeah. At 12:36, the Cemfjord passed the Bro-Ness with a heading of 270 degrees and a speed of 10.6 knots. So she is now officially inside the Pentland Firth. She was spotted by the MV Pentalina, a catamaran ferry that was just 1 nautical miles ahead of her. It was at this time that it was noted that she appeared to be upright and making slow headway, but pitching heavily in the large waves.
That's not a good sign.
But everybody was pitching in those large waves.
Fair.
Yeah. The Pentalina is a big ferry. We're not talking, little 1-car ferry. We're talking, gigantic ferry that can carry very big cars or, lots of cars back and forth between. We're talking like a major transport ferry.
Okay.
So, when I first read it, I was like, oh, it's a catamaran ferry, No, I looked this thing up, and she looks like a cruise ship. For comparison purposes to, if they're saying that this ship is pitching, I'm sure she was also pitching a bit herself. Between 12:30s...
I think it's also a good point to note that if you have a ship that weighs how many tons?
So she was loaded with 284 tons of cement, and she already weighed 1,800 tons.
So you have a ship that large pitching.
Pitching and plowing.
Yeah, I think y'all need to understand how absolutely significant that is. That's a lot of motion. It's just like what was that, the Eileen Moore Lighthouse thing that people were talking about? There's a reason that the steps, all this stuff was moved out of the way, these big concrete platforms and stuff. It's because waves are strong.
Oh, those waves on that lighthouse story took the handrails, the solid iron handrails, and bent them backwards.
It had to have been a wave. There's nothing creepy about that. And once you start looking it up and you realize that had to have been a storm, it had to have been a wave. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah, water's powerful.
Water is powerful.
Let's see. Okay, so between 12:36 and 13:15, the tidal stream within the Pentland Firth was about 3.5 knots, and the ship's speed was 10.6 knots. So the Cemfjord was moving against the tidal stream, making her average speed about 7 knots. However, it was discovered while looking at the speed above ground, her SOG record, that she was also experiencing a 6-knot northwesterly ebb. So she was really moving at 1 knot.
That's slow.
That's very slow. And if you're a ship in a storm moving at 1 knot, this is not necessarily helpful or a good thing.
No, it's not. Just could end up pushing you backwards versus forward, and you're trying to go into the storm.
Well,
not with it.
Right, and then also that is that the MIB report noted that this speed, in combination with the unpredictable sea conditions, likely led to a loss of water flow over the rudder and a complete loss of steerage.
Okay, that makes sense.
You can't steer the ship if there's no water moving across the rudder.
Yeah.
But the lowering the speed of the ship was the logical solution to address the excessive pitching and plowing of the ship in the storm.
Okay.
So the master and first officer probably made the right decision by lowering, at least for them, lowering the speed. But due to these factors, Cemfjord began turning to port, and this put the ever-rising sea waves at the starboard bow.
Okay.
As Cemfjord turned further to port in these waves, They aggressively broke against the starboard side, and they made her incredibly unstable. Remember, she's full of dry cement. She's a bit top-heavy due to the way her bridge is set up, and she's her depth is not deep, so there's not a lot under the water. You know, like I said, she's got a 4.4 meter draft. That's not that for a ship this size. That's not very deep. So, with the large amounts of water spilling onto the deck from the starboard side, she was forced beam first into the water and capsized.
Okay. Well.
Yep.
Do you know how long that took?
So, it happened exactly at 13:15.
Okay.
Because her last AIS transmission went out at 13:15 on January 2nd, 2014, and then after that, all communication with the Cemfjord ceased.
Okay.
That last transmission showed that she was heading at 239 degrees and moving at 6.3 knots, which is, like we said, less than 1 knot based on the ebb and the tidal stream. At 14:16 on January 3rd, 2015, 25 hours after she capsized, the MV Rossi noticed, MV Rossi is another ferry vessel that was in the area, noticed an, quote, unusual object floating in the distance.
Oh, no.
And they headed towards it to investigate. The Rossi is also a relatively large ferry vessel.
We probably would have done the same thing, terrifyingly,
Absolutely.
But we would have done the same thing.
Absolutely. Yep, and then I'd have screamed, thrown up, passed out, woke up, and hoped somebody began the rescue. So at 14:40, the crew of the Rossi realized that what they were seeing was the upturned hull of a ship with the word Cemfjord written across the starboard bow that was facing them. I sent you the MAIB's investigative report.
Okay.
I want you to go to page 23 and look at image 8. That's what they saw. This is actually an image taken by the MV Rossi.
Oh my God! Right. Oh, that's terrible. We'll link this, but
yes, we will link this. The Rossi's. Oh, you wanna tell them what you're seeing?
So I'm seeing a. It's seeing only a portion of the front of a ship, and it's like orange and white, and you can see some of the cargo containers. I guess that's what they are on the top.
It's part of the deck.
Y'all, where the anchor would be is pointing in toward the water, not not the way it should be going.
Yeah. So the orange part is the draft of the ship. So you see those little numbers?
Yes, the meter lineage.
Yeah, those are the meter lines. And so what you're seeing is this 292 foot long boat partially submerged and upside down in the water.
Yeah, there ain't no doubt what it is because the name is clearly right there on it.
It's right there in big bold letters. The Rossi's captain alerted the Coast Guard when they saw this, and the Rossi itself began the search for survivors. The Coast Guard then initiated a search and rescue and began to look for survivors by sending out helicopters and multiple vessels to the location. So the time is currently 14:40. At 1500, the Rossis watched as the Cemfjord's bow rose vertically into the air as her stern sank into the seabed. She would stay in this position, standing upright with 22 feet of her bow sticking out of the dark water for the next 6.5 hours. And if you go to image 9...
Oh, no, I don't want to. Hang on, I'm going.
If you go to image 9...
Oh, my God.
That's what they were looking at. And the Coast Guard put out put out buoys, and they actually kept a light on this vessel as they continued the search for survivors as darkness fell. And at 21:20, she finally gave up and sank out of sight. No survivors were ever found.
So all 8 of them perished?
All 8 perished.
I hope it was fast.
I do too. Well, I have more to tell.
But hey, no. Go ahead.
So, 2 life rafts were discovered between January 4th and January 5th, but no survivors or evidence of life were found on them. Sonar of Cemfjord's resting location showed that she was in 270 feet of water, resting on her port side. 2 ROV surveys of the ship showed, and these are direct quotes from the MAIB's report, that the main superstructure was significantly distorted and the port bridge wing area was partially buried in the seabed, which makes sense. The rudder was stuck at 10 degrees. All windows on the bridge were broken and missing. The starboard side door that would have accessed what they called the accommodations, we would call them like crew quarters, were closed. Yeah. The rescue boat was missing. 2 life buoys were gone from their stowages. The deck stowage for the crew life jackets and immersion suits was missing. All 4 of the cement loading ports were shut and secured, and the forward cargo hold loading hatch was buckled and partially open. So when I was reading that, my brain went in all different directions, and I knew what the evidence might mean and what it didn't, so I continued reading the report, and they noted that there were no bodies observed either through the ROV survey or, around the vessel, but that the violent storm and sinking likely caused all of the survival gear to be torn away from the ship, as there was no evidence that the crew attempted to leave the ship. Due to the proximity of the capsizing event and the discovery of the ship, if the crew had been wearing their survival suits and flotation devices, recovery of their bodies would have been highly likely. The MAIB, not the MIB, Men in Black, the MAIB made the assessment that the bodies of the crew were likely still inside the hull of the ship.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because it sounded like it happened really quick.
Yeah,
it happened in such a violent manner when it capsized that no one had time to do anything.
I don't think they did. I really don't. Multiple safety issues were noted in this investigative report, including multiple miscommunications and misunderstandings regarding mechanical malfunctions aboard the Cemfjord. Bryce was recommended to ensure that its master and chief officers received training in their vessel's newly installed stability and cargo management tools, and that they become familiar with the company's revised cargo loading and passage planning procedures. That they needed to take robust measures to improve the safety culture on board the vessel and within the company as a whole, in particular monitoring the use and effectiveness of its upgraded accident reporting and information sharing software system. And yes, Cemfjord should not have been there.
No, I was just thinking that. I'm like, there's no reason that it wasn't, before it even left the dock, it never should have left the dock yet.
Yeah, it shouldn't have. Why did they know that they had issues in 2013 that they never addressed? And then why was the pressure so high on this captain to push this crew into a gale when this ship is designed like a riverboat? It's not designed to go into storms like that. She's basically got a flat bottom. It'd be easy to capsize it. And she's full of cement, and her freaking port ballast pump isn't working. So if she begins to take on water, they got no fucking way to get it out. And then you throw her into a storm like that.
Did they ever find the bodies, or?
They didn't.
Okay, so did they ever go into the ship, or did they do salvage or recovery?
I will get to that.
Okay, let me All right, you'll get to that.
The MAIB made a recommendation to the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency that suggested that they reevaluate their voluntary reporting scheme for the Pentland Firth, as well as establish a stronger surveillance protocol for AIS monitoring. Because why was it that Cemfjord's last AIS transmission happened at 1:15 and nobody bothered to try and communicate with her until she was discovered ass over tea kettle 25 hours later?
I was going to say, yeah, because they said they didn't have to self-report when they left.
Right.
When they got out of the
Right,
Firth.
so they didn't have to tell them, exactly, because they'd be monitoring them on the AIS. But were they?
Obviously.
Right. The report, answered a lot of questions that people had, and it was a thoroughly done report, and nobody argued it. The ship's owners and management team at Bryce decided, and because she was only in 270 feet of water, they could have salvaged. They could have tried to salvage.
She's full of cement. I mean,
I'm sure that played a factor in their choice to not attempt salvaging her.
I mean, the bodies are in there, probably, and she's full of now wet cement.
Right. And
yeah.
Exactly. That would have made it increasingly difficult. And I'm sure that the fact that the MAIB suggested that, or made inference that the bodies were still in the hull, Bryce made it open that they were going to leave her as a sea grave.
Yeah. No, I was just about to say that's what they should do.
Mm-hmm. On July 3rd, 2015, over 30 family members from Poland and the Philippines convened over the rocky waters above the shipwreck to memorialize their lost loved ones. So the 8 lives lost were Master Paweł Cherushinsky, aged 43, Chief Officer Jaroslaw Orlo, 54, Chief Engineer Roman Tomas, 56, Third Engineer Jerome Narvas, 32, Ordinary Seaman Henryk Dubanowski, 55, Ordinary Seaman Tomasz Kwiatkowski, 31, Able Seaman Artur Podrazaka, age 24, and Ordinary Seaman and Cook Artur Wegorek, 24. 3 of these men were on their very first crossing with Cemfjord.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's the story.
Woo. That's, y'all, you gotta look at the images. You gotta look at the images to fully understand it, because it is extremely rare for any ship to end up vertical for any amount of time, that you can actually see it still even above the water, and then it go vertical and you can still see it.
Much
Very
less
rare.
6.5 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, there are ones, and we're actually going to cover in later seasons, the most famous vertical shipwreck out there, the HMS Victoria.
Is that one still vertical?
Oh, forever and ever and ever. Half of her's in the seabed.
Yeah, I thought it still was.
She physically makes me ill. I love her so much. And, the images are so haunting that it makes this story, it gets that glitz that it needs to kind of be popular.
Yeah, it's very, what's the best way to put this? It literally is chilling. It's cold. Like, when you look at the pictures, you're like, oh, wow. Anybody who's in there has to be dead.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
If they made it out, they're not going to make it anywhere near a person.
No, you just hope the families can find peace.
Oh, yeah. Because it's one of those cases that also never should have happened. Mm-hmm. You're taking a ship that is too old to be doing what it was doing. She's
not designed for that. She's not a cutter or anything. This was entirely avoidable. Yeah. 100% avoidable, and that's what the investigation determined.
Was anybody fined?
I don't know about that. I could not. So all the articles are either in German or Polish or Dutch, neither of the languages which I speak, and Google Translate tries its best, but a lot of these news articles are either archived and inaccessible, or I couldn't get them to translate. I'm assuming people were fined.
I would imagine so, that they were, because you mentioned some changes that ended up being made, and that's pretty horrific. Yeah, y'all got to look at the report, because Raquel sent it to me, and we were talking about it during our little break thing.
There's a lot of good information in there. It's 100 pages, and it's well worth the read.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I'm definitely going to be looking at it. Not just the pictures and horrifying myself.
Yep.
Cool.
You ready for the Pearl of Wisdom?
Yeah.
All right. So today's Pearl of Wisdom comes from Sir Brian Appleton, a technical advisor during the investigation of the Piper Alpha oil platform disaster in 1988. That's a story that I'll be covering in Season 3. He said, "Safety is not an intellectual exercise to keep us in work. It is a matter of life and death. It is the sum of our contributions to safety management that determines whether the people we work with live or die."
That should resonate.
Safety should be a culture.
Yep. And that's one thing that I know in my line of work we try to do. The culture of safety, exactly the wording of it. We actually have something called the Safety Minute in all of our training videos. And we have a safety committee, and they put out a safety minute. It's not a minute, but it's a bunch of minutes, so it still counts.
It's worth it, though. I think about that frequently, you know, when you're out at work, and I'm like, all right, let's just hope that today's not the day she gets hit by somebody's car because they're rubbernecking.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those, and it's
scary.
Pretty done with it. But it's the more you hear about something, the more you are exposed to it. Like, you know, for instance, weird reference, but chocolate. Who do you relate chocolate to? Like, what company do you relate chocolate to?
Oh, Hershey's.
Hershey's, of course. So if you constantly promote something over and over and over, people are going to relate it to something. So
Safety's a brand.
Safety is... hey, you know, it's the same concept, you know?
Safety is just as cool as any fashion company out there. Safety first, safety second, coolest third. Well, we can make safety cool.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when they put cars together, you know, you could order cars a certain way so women's hair wouldn't touch the roof, so the back seat wouldn't mess with their hair. My Impala was built that way, so you know,
but not safe.
It definitely not safe. You could order seatbelts or not in it because it depended on how much you want to spend on it. Because back then that wasn't a requirement. But yeah, if a hard hat messes up your hair probably shouldn't look like that. There
is this for some reason fine line between safety and comfort, or you know, safety and meeting expectations. And to me, safety trumps everything, and everybody should understand that.
Yeah, no one should have to die to get a stoplight put up. You know,
nobody should have to die to get their cement on time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's funny, you know, with the stoplight thing that you just mentioned, it's not just one person has to die. There has to be 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's how many accidents happen to get a stop sign, how many deaths have to happen to get a stoplight. And now it's not, that's kind of antiquated, thank goodness, because they see how many accidents occur and they put stoplights up now, or how much traffic there is.
Or they do a risk potential. Yeah, they do a risk potential assessment.
Yeah, they do a risk assessment of what's the potential for this to occur. But back when, I mean, you'd have to have how many accidents for a stoplight, how many accidents for a stop sign, and how many deaths for a stoplight. Yeah. I mean, they're still out there. I go to calls where I'm like, there should be a light here. Why isn't there a light here?
Hopefully someday there will be.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed this story.
I did. That was riveting and terrifying.
All right, well, we will see you all in 2 weeks.
Bye, y'all.
Today's episode was written by Raquel Weiss. Sound editing and mixing by Raven Hutto. Our theme song was composed by Steve Brendley. Today's sources can be found on our Facebook or Instagram at Twins Discuss Podcast and Twitter at Twins Discuss. The Twins will be back in 2 weeks with an all-new episode.